What's up, guys? It's Josh back here. I just want to do an old school wrestling video tonight. I seen my buddy Jim and I was talking about the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan match today from WrestleMania 6. And I'm going to start doing these videos where you could be the booker, okay? And we're going to do WrestleMania 6 tonight. And this is the card that I would have if I was the booker for WrestleMania 6. Now remember, this is just my opinion, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of guys out there that won't agree with what I have, but these are just the matches that I would put on the card. I would rearrange some angles and do some things different. I left all the guys on the card except for four, excuse me. I took the Bolsheviks off. If you remember, they fought the Hart Foundation. I took Hercules off, and I took Coco Beware off. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some matches on here that guys don't agree with, but I made these matches based on who I would like to see work together and what I think would have made the pay-per-view better. Even though it was a great WrestleMania. WrestleMania 6 was one of the best ever. I changed some things around. But the only match that I left the same is my opening match, and that is the Barbarian and Tito Santana. Honestly, I just left it the same because there really wasn't nothing I could figure out to do with them. Now, if you remember, and then the second match I would have would be Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Bad News Brown. Now, if you remember, this is where Bad News Brown and Piper actually had a match. Well, I just figured I'd switch it up, Duggan and Bad News Brown. Two really stiff wrestlers, pretty much, they're not technically sound and they're not the best wrestlers in the world. But I would have them going up against each other. And I believe Jim Duggan fought Dino Bravo at that I believe he fought Dino Bravo at WrestleMania 6. But I switched the matches around and I have Duggan and Bad News Brown. I can't remember if Duggan fought Bravo or Earthquake. I can't really remember, but then in my third match, I would have Brutus Beefcake versus Dino Bravo. If you remember, Beefcake had a pretty good match with Mr. Perfect that night. But in my opinion, Mr. Perfect should have been higher up on the card. And as I go through my matches, you'll see that. But I would have had Brutus Beefcake versus Dino Bravo. Then my next match, okay, this is what I would have had happen if I was the booker. If you remember, Andre and Haku were the tag champs. Well, I would have had them lose the titles to Demolition on a Saturday night's main event and had them actually break up on the Saturday night pay-per-view after they lost the tag titles instead of WrestleMania 6. And if you remember, the Twin Towers also split up right before WrestleMania 6. So what I would have had happen at WrestleMania 6, I would have had Andre and the Boss Man versus Hakeem and Haku in a tag match. That's just what I would have did. That way, you can fit more guys on the card and more tag matches. If that makes sense to y'all, if you understand what I'm saying, I would have had Andre and the Boss Man versus Hakeem and Haku, which I think would have been cool. Instead of just having a boring Hakeem and Boss Man one-on-one match that lasted not very long, and having the Colossal Connection break up WrestleMania 6, I would have had them break up at like a Saturday night's main event. And that way you could throw a tag match in there, Andre and the Bossman versus Akeem and Haku. Then my next match would have been, if you remember, it would have been Rick Martel versus Jimmy Snuka. Now, if you remember, Rick Martel fought Coco Beware at WrestleMania 6 and Rick Rude versus Snuka. And here's why I did this. In my opinion, Coco Beware has got to be one of the most overrated guys ever. I mean, he's in the WWE Hall of Fame and he was a jobber. I don't ever remember him being making any kind of difference in the wrestling business. Just my opinion. But I would have Rick Martel versus Jimmy Snuka. You know, I would have it. Oh yeah, I would have them two guys work. Jimmy Snuka, you know, he's one of the most favorite guys of all time in the WWE, and he fought Rick Rude at WrestleMania 6, and they were kind of high up on the card that night, but you know, I just feel like Rick Rude should have been working somebody else at that time. Jimmy Snuka had been in the business forever. But yeah, I would have Rick Martel and Jimmy Snuka, which I would think would have been a pretty good match. Now, my next match that I have is kind of a mix. I mixed it up real good, you know. And I have Rowdy Piper versus Earthquake. Now, this match, you could have had Earthquake in the Piper's Pit before, you know, WrestleMania leading up. You could have had, like, Earthquake destroy the Piper's Pit and then do his finisher where he sits on the guys on Piper. And it could have led up to a really good feud if you think about it. I never remember these guys working against each other. Earthquake, believe what you want, and you can say what you want, but the younger fans don't know. Earthquake was a pretty good guy, a pretty good worker for a big man, I thought. And putting him up against Piper, I think it would have been a really good feud. Then we get a tag team match, and it's a match that was on WrestleMania 6's card, and I just left it the same because I really didn't see anything that could be used. They could be used, and it's the Rockers and the Orient Express. We all know the Rockers are a great tag team, but talented-wise, I think Orient Express, I think they were highly underrated. They never really got a push in the WWE, but if you watch the guys, man, they can work, you know. They're really good workers. Then we get up into my big matches. The next match on the card, if you remember, well, my match is Dusty Rhodes versus Rick Rude. Now, I think they could have really did some things on the storyline for these two guys. You know, Rick Rude being the bustle-bound poster fitness boy against Dusty Rhodes, who, you know, call it what you want, he's a great wrestler, but putting bodies up against each other, you could just have some kind of feud, you know, and it would have been awesome. Dusty Rhodes and Rick Rude. I think that would have been an awesome feud. You know, I just think, my opinion, I think it would have been a great feud. Dusty Rhodes and Rick Rude, WrestleMania 6. And then a feud that we seen later on, but I think could have been cool at WrestleMania 6, would have been Jake the Snake Roberts versus the Macho King. You could have definitely did some things there with those two guys. Even though later on down the line we seen a great feud, great storyline, and great work between Macho Man and Jake the Snake, when we seen that feud, Jake was the heel and Macho was a face. But just think if you flipped it around, you could have did some killer things there with that feud. You know, I mean, you could almost did anything with them two guys because they're so creative. They're great workers. So that's another match. Jake the Snake versus the Macho King. Then in my tag team championship match, we talked about it earlier. How I would have had Demolition beating the Colossal Connection for the tag team championship on the Saturday night's main event. And I would have had, I mean, we've seen these teams work a million times together, and they never had a bad match. I would have had the tag team championship, Demolition versus the Hart Foundation, and Demolition winning. I just think it was anytime them four guys work together, I just really haven't seen a bad match. And I don't think Demolition really gets credit that they deserved for being a great tag team back then. I was a huge fan of Demolition back in the day, and always loved their work with the Hart Foundation, and that would have been a tag team match that I definitely would have put on the card. Now, my last two matches I'm going to talk about, I'm probably going to get some heat for some guys. But this is just my opinion, and this is just what I would do. I know the Hogan Warrior match was epic. And I know it's the first time, like Jim and I said, you've seen two faces do that. And that was cool, but my next match would have been the Intercontinental title match. And it would have been the Ultimate Warrior versus the $1 Million Man. And I would have had Warrior win. And the reason I did this is, in my opinion, and I'm not going by what I watched on the Ultimate Warrior DVD or anything. I'm just going by actual facts. Warrior was huge at this time, and I understand why they picked him to be WWF champion. But in my opinion, if I'm a booker, I know deep down Warrior's not ready to be the world champion. What was he in the WWF for 3 or 4 years before he was, just me. I would have had Intercontinental title match, the Ultimate Warrior versus the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. I would have had a Warrior win. I would have Warrior keep the Intercontinental title over the $1 Million Man. I just didn't feel that Warrior. Back then, as a kid, I was a huge Warrior fan, and I loved it when he won the WWE title. But as a booker and as a businessman and as knowing the business back, I would have known that Warrior wasn't ready to be WWF champion. It's proven after the match. Everybody's worried about Hogan. And there's a guy. There's a few other guys that were more deserving to be WWF champion than Warrior. And that would bring up my main event. My main event would have been Hulk Hogan defending his WWF championship against Mr. Perfect. Now, you could have Warrior win the WWF title in a few years. When he actually deserved it. But I would have had Perfect leave WrestleMania 6 as WWF champion. And I said this because Mr. Perfect could out-wrestle Warrior any night. I mean, come on, there's no comparison. For the first time, you could have had a bad guy, a heel, leaving a WrestleMania with the WWF championship. He could have had help from Genius and some of the Heenan family. And down the line, Perfect could have lost it to maybe Warrior. I wouldn't even give it to Warrior that soon. I'm not sure what face. Maybe Hogan again. I don't know. But you got to remember, Warrior. I mean, Perfect could out wrestle Warrior. He was way more deserving to be champion. I know I'm going to get heat for this next comment, but in my opinion, Mr. Perfect, $1 Million Man, and Rick Rude, all three deserve to be champion before Warrior. And that is my card if I was the booker for WrestleMania 6. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll be doing more of these every night. I don't know which WrestleMania I'll do next. Yeah, I hope y'all guys liked it. I want to give a shout out to my buddy Boston Fan 79 V1 and Gemini 888. If you ain't subscribed to them, man, go subscribe. They got great channels. But yeah, this is my if I was a booker WrestleMania 6 card. Like I always say, get your money and pay your bills. Peace.